The Qunari have always been an interesting, albeit largely misunderstood culture within the Dragon Age series. Now more than ever, with the big reveal of Qunari becoming playable for the first time, the fanbase's interest in and the importance of understanding Thedas' most complex and unique culture is at an all-time high. So I hit the books and combed the lore to bring you only the most pertinent knowledge of our strange horned friends to give you the most out of your interactions with these mighty creatures, and to inform your potential role as one, should you so choose. First off, I think it would be remiss not to have a quick vocab lesson, so that as we get into the complexities of their culture, we're not tripped up by words without meaning. Their language is called Qunlat, and beyond the fact that all the words are foreign to us, a lot of them have multiple meanings, so it can be hard to understand. Let's start with the word Qunari itself, as it has dual meanings. Its first and most important distinction is a follower of the Qun, the philosophical tome that informs their entire culture. The most important thing to understand is that this can and does refer to people of many races, in fact all the races of Thedas. All that is required for one to be given the title of Qunari is to adopt the Qun. Its second distinction is that of the large, gray-skinned, usually horned race that the term is most often used to define. Due to these dual meanings, it can become quite confusing when speaking on the subject to determine whether or not the term is meant in the religious or racial sense. For that reason, I'll be using a second term, Qasith, to clarify the distinction. Qasith is essentially a retired term within the actual world of Dragon Age, more a term that a knowledge historian might use, but refers to an ancient culture from which the Qun, and ultimately the modern-day Qunari, originated from. So to avoid confusion, I'll use both terms when necessary to distinguish between race and religious affiliation. However, keep in mind that the term Qasith will more than likely never be used in the actual game. All of the Qasith race will simply be referred to by outsiders as strictly Qunari. But within the Qunari culture, believe it or not, there are two more terms important to the distinguishing of Qunari and or Qasith, and will be particularly important to any player choosing Qasith as their character. Those terms are Vishath and Tal-Vishath. To the Qunari, Vishath is a dirty word, describing to them the lowest of the low, a former Qunari who has abandoned the ways and teaching of the Qun. Under Qunari law, no individual is in fact allowed to abandon the Qun, and so most Vishath are runaways and loners, similar to apostates like Morrigan. Its literal translation is Grey Ones, so this implies that the term is reserved for Qasith who abandoned the Qun, not other races. Tal-Vishath is a name that the Vishath gave themselves, and means the true Grey Ones. While Vishath are still considered redeemable through re-education, Tal-Vishath also has the extra implication that these deserters are proud of their choice, and have become violent in their resistance of the Qun, probably in regard to resisting the Arvarod's attempts to hunt and capture them. An Arvarod is one who is tasked with the pursuit and capture of, or defeat of Tal-Vishath. They also serve an important purpose controlling Qunari mages, which I'll mention later.
And you are Arvarod?
My role is to hold the leash and hunt the Grey Ones who lead the Qun.
Going back to Vishath, this term can also refer to an extremely rare occurrence, a Qasith that is born entirely outside of the Qunari culture, and or without knowledge of the Qun. According to David Gator, the player-controlled Qasith will have the distinction of Vishath, meaning that either you have abandoned the Qun, escaped from the Qunari and have yet to be found, or else somehow the circumstances of your birth were such that you were completely removed from Qunari culture. My guess is that it will be the latter, and your story may even be similar to the circumstances surrounding Hawke's sister Bethany's birth, where her father Malcolm Hawke was an apostate and she was born into magic outside of the circle. Perhaps your parents were wandering Vishath who escaped the Qunari for the same reason as the Hawks, that one of them was born with the gift of magic, and they eloped to be together, as the Qun's laws on magic users are even more harsh than that of the Chantries. This would also be a handy explanation for your parentage, should you choose your Inquisitor to be a Qasith mage. Speaking of mages and the harshness of the Qun on magic, if you do choose Qasith mage, the Qunari culture would define you as Sarabaz, a literal translation of which is dangerous thing. These poor mages live in conditions that make the Chantry Circle of Magi look like a vacation resort. They live their entire lives in chains to prevent them from harming others or using their magic. with heavy metal masks over their faces so they can't spread their contamination through their eyes, and have their lips sewn shut so that any who may have become possessed by a demon cannot spread their lies or attempt to corrupt the balance of any just follower of the Qun. In addition, they are each assigned to an Arvarad, who holds what's referred to as their leash, a sort of rod that, ironically, casts some sort of binding spell over their Cerebas. This is because the Qunari fear magic most of anything in the world. The Qun seeks above all else balance and the control of chaos, and the unpredictability of magic users with their potential for demonic possession are the highest and most dangerous form of this chaos. Although these conditions are harsh, the Qunari do not hate Cerebas. They actually pity them and have a great deal of respect for Cerebas that properly follow the Qun, because they must constantly keep the chaos of the magic inside them under control. While it's impossible to speak for all Cerebas who exist in this condition, the one Cerebas that we have encountered did not despise his treatment, or his captors either. The character appears in Dragon Age 2 during the quest Shepherding Wolves and is named Qunari.
He's just sort of a great lump.
This name is given to him by a human, however, as Qunari are not given individual names. They are given the name of their position and role in the life of the Qun, which I'll mention again later. Though you may attempt to convince his Arvarad to allow Qunari to go free, the Arvarad shows you the loyalty of Cerebas by telling Qunari to show you his place in the Qun, and that he has no desire to escape or be freed. Even if you fight the Arvarad to free him, Qunari expresses regret over the occurrence, and refers to his unbinding from the Arvarad as odd and wrong. Being that you now hold the leash after the Arvarad's defeat, even though he believes your intentions were wrong, Qunari names you Bosvarad, an outsider who has assumed the role of Arvarad, with the literal translation of one worthy of following. Qunari proceeds to kill himself anyway, however, because outside of the control of his Arvarad and company of other Qunari mages, known as a Karatam, he fears that he may have become corrupted by a demon, as the Qun tells him he may have without his knowledge, and that death is now his only recourse to control the chaos.
I do not want to die. I want to live by the Qun.
Which means dying.
Yes. Is that hard to grasp?
So, yeah. This is the kind of crap you'll be facing if you choose the Qunari mage route. Talvashoth Cerebas. One shudders at the thought. It's got a nice ring to it, though. I hope you're taking notes, because here's a few more terms to throw at you. Remember how I mentioned Qunari don't have individual names? That includes the infamous Sten, which is a word in Qunlat simply meaning an infantry platoon commander, his role before you meet him caged in Lothering. It would be just another of the many Qunlat words, save for Sten's major role in the game. That leads into another familiar term for DA2 veterans, Arishok. Arishok is one of the three leaders of the Qunari, or the Triumvirate, and means he is the military leader of the Qunari. It will be interesting if we are to meet Sten again in the games, because after the death of the former Arishok in 2, his character is at some point appointed the new Arishok, and so his name will be precisely that. Just like for themselves, the Qunari also don't afford outsiders individual names, and have only a handful of names to designate them. The most commonly used name is simply Boz, literally meaning thing, and basically also means purposeless. It's pretty harsh for sure, but other cultures are just as foreign to the Qunari as the Qunari are to them, and while all have a designated purpose and goal in life as outlined by the Qun look at the more free-thinking structure of other cultures like humanity as chaotic and meaningless, essentially creatures groping around the world in darkness without guidance or purpose.
Since we arrived, I have seen nothing but greed and weakness. Dwarves, humans, elves, just festering. No order, no goal.
If you somehow manage to prove to a Qunari that you are in fact worth something and have some purpose in your life, you may be awarded the new title of Basilit An, a title reserved for a non-Qunari who has earned their respect, which the Warden, Hawk, and other major characters from the games have been awarded. But aside from the frequency with which we've seen this distinction given out, being that as players we're always controlling and interacting with extremely distinguished and important individuals, this is a very rare occurrence. Well, that does it for part 1 of my Dragon Age 101 series, The Qun and You. Be sure to tune in for part 2, where I go more into the philosophy behind the Qun. Thanks for watching, and until then, Panahaidon, humans.